your right and the light. It's hard for me to see.
7, 6.
Good evening, and welcome to our candidate forum for the St. Paul School Board. My name is Linda McClune, and I am a League-trained moderator as well as a League member. Today's forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of St. Paul in partnership with the St. Paul Neighborhood Network. On their behalf, I want to thank all the candidates who have agreed to participate in our candidate forum this evening. We believe the success of our city and state depends on the values, knowledge, and commitment of our elected officials. Thus, it is essential for the public to understand the views, opinions, and commitments of people running for elected office in Minnesota. It is the understanding that better equips voters with information to make informed voting decisions. We appreciate the candidates and we actually have audience members taking their time to be here tonight, so thank you. The candidates participating in today's forum have all agreed to the forum rules, which were included in their invitation to participate. This forum is being recorded by the St. Paul Neighborhood Network for viewing by the public. Recording of the forum will stream live and appear on multiple platforms. Recordings of this event, whether they be in person or on a computer screen, may not be used without the express written approval of the League of Women Voters. The League will only allow audio-video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety, except by the media reporting on this event. All questions that were submitted in advance, I have piles in front of me, need to be addressed to all candidates. So if there's any that were specific to one or two people, they won't be asked. And we don't allow personal or attacking questions. And of course, because you guys are all running for school board, we know you wouldn't do that anyway. And all the questions that were submitted become the property of the League of Women Voters. Similarly, the answers to the questions need to focus on the question themselves. You can discuss a candidate's record, but personal attacks will not be tolerated. Each candidate will be given a 2-minute introductory statement. The candidates will then have 1 minute to answer questions and 30 seconds for a rebuttal should that prove necessary if somebody was called out on something. Rebuttals are, again, only allowed if somebody has called out a candidate by name. The timer will signal when you have 30 seconds, as you can see, and then also when your time is up. And I will, oh goodness, I will enforce that rule because it's just fair to everybody to make sure that everybody has the same amount of time. I will begin in alphabetical order because it just was easy when I was typing. And then in the closing statements, we will go in reverse alphabetical order, okay? And when I do the questions, I will mix up the order a little bit. I have a nice grid here, and sometimes I'll change directions, and that way you're not always following the same person, which can be problematic. So I'd like to introduce our candidates. So first we have the individuals running for 3 of the 4-year seats on the school board. These are James Farnsworth, Hala Anderson, Jennifer McPherson, Jim Vu, Uriah Ward, and Ryan Williams. And then we have candidates running for the special 2-year term of office, and these are Jeannie Foster and Clayton Howard. So thank you all for participating this evening. So we'll begin with the opening statements, and candidates, again, you each have 2 minutes for your opening statement, and we will begin with James Farnsworth.
Well, good evening, and first off, I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters St. Paul for all of their work in putting together tonight's candidate forum. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight and appreciate the opportunity to participate. A little bit about my background. I'm a multiracial adoptee born in St. Cloud, Minnesota. After spending some time in the foster care system, I was raised here in the Twin Cities by 2 loving parents who both worked as longtime public school teachers and union stewards. I'm a proud product of St. Paul Public Schools, graduating from Highland Park Senior High in 2016. And now professionally, I serve as the executive director of the Highland Business Association, and I'm a renter in the Summit University neighborhood right down the block from the MLK Rec Center and Rondo Complex. Ever since I graduated, I've remained involved and active in school district issues. I really believe the success of our public schools right here in St. Paul is extremely critical to our entire city. We have one of the most diverse school districts in the nation in St. Paul, and that diversity, which lends itself to an extraordinary amount of opportunity, deserves strong and effective stewards serving on its governing board. I'm running for the St. Paul School Board on a platform of good governance, educational equity, and strengthening academic achievement. I believe my skills and experiences uniquely position me for school board service. I look forward to expanding on the values I laid out and much more during tonight's discussion. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for convening us this evening, and it's a pleasure to be alongside fellow candidates having such important discussions about the future of our district and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for opening statements is Hala Anderson.
Hi, y'all. My name is Hala Henderson. I am one of the candidates for the 4-year term on the school board this year. I am so proud to be here. I'm proud to be here tonight with my fellow candidates, and I'm so grateful to the League of Women Voters St. Paul for holding this. And I think it's important to say at the forefront that I never thought that I would run for office. I expected that my role in these spaces was going to be to get really amazing people elected into positions of power to create systemic change. And I think a lot of that has to do with my identity as a woman of color, and additionally as someone who has experienced what it means to be forgotten in systems and to have to fight for my place in these spaces. I am currently a policy director for a statewide youth advisory council, which has allowed me to work with young people on a daily basis and to really think about what is possible in policy and in politics when we center the voices of young people and folks who have been marginalized or left out of decision-making processes. You know, I grew up in North Minneapolis. I grew up in a community where a lot of the times we were the last to be communicated with. And it took my school closing, it took community programming being cut from my community that forced my family to leave our home and to leave our community and to find ourselves in Mankato, Minnesota. Which is really where I got my first call to organize and to be in community with folks. And I've carried that with me. I've carried that with me through my time organizing over the past 5 or so years in St. Paul politics. And I am just so excited to be here as one of your DFL endorsed candidates, as someone who has been working with young people and who has been supported by our educators and working class folks in the city. Excited for this conversation and to think about what we can do to really bring everybody into this space.
Thank you. Jennifer McPherson are you Jennifer? Awesome. Welcome. So next opening statement, you have 2 minutes. Jennifer McPherson.
So, I'm Jennifer McPherson. I have 5 children in the district. I'm running for school board because I've been fighting so long by myself and for other parents. This is the last step that I have to make a real change, a positive change in our district. My platform was built by educators, families, and community members. When I speak for everybody as a whole. I'm just in this race for everybody and for the better of our district. I want to make our district #1. And, you know, I just want to see that real positive change in our district that I know that we can do. We need to bring back some of the old stuff mixed with some new stuff, and our district will be fine. We're going to repair, we're going to recover, our enrollment will go up. This is the Parents Board of Education, and that's what we're going to do, is bring the power back to the parents and get our district right.
Thank you. Next opening statement, Jim Vu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jim Vu, and first of all, I want to thank League of Women Voters for providing this space and inviting us here today to talk about our candidacy for St. Paul Public Schools Board of Education. I want to thank the other candidates for being in this space, because it's great to see everybody in the same space. I learned a lot from each and every one of you. One thing that I want voters to know about me is that I'm not originally from St. Paul. I'm not from Minnesota. I came from Oklahoma and Texas. And I moved up here because my wife lived up here. And when I lived down in Texas, I grew up in Oklahoma, Texas, and I didn't like that experience growing up. You know, as an Asian American, as a Hmong person, I felt invisible in those spaces, right? So, as I feel like as an outsider coming here to a city where there's a lot of Hmong people, I see a lot of opportunities, and I don't take that opportunity for granted. And I had to learn to love this city. I had to learn to love its winters. I had to learn to love its you know, you can experience 3 seasons in 3 days. I had to learn to love that. Had to learn buying a car every 2 years because the salt in the sand just takes it. So one thing about St. Paul Public Schools is that I had to learn about the school system as well. I have 4 kids in the district, ranging from high school to elementary. And my 2 oldest sons have special needs. They were diagnosed with autism at a young age. And if you know anything about autism, then you know that they have it at 5, they'll have it at 45. And how I learned about the district was being involved in their school. And over the years, I got involved in the school district at 360. And then I got to learn some administrators. I got to learn some school board members. And that's what I did. Throughout the years, I built relationships. I built bridges. And that's what I'll continue to do. Right now, I'm the vice chair of St. Paul Public Schools, and I'm running for re-election for the 4-year seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Next opening statement, Uriah Ward.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say really quick thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum. It's so wonderful that we're able to be here today to talk about the issues, because whenever we have a school board election, what we're doing is coming together as a community to decide how to build our future together. And that's a really exciting thing, and I hope that as many people participate in this election as possible. My name is Uriah Ward. I use he, him pronouns. I am one of the DFL endorsed candidates for St. Paul School Board, and I'm really excited to be in this race. I used to be a middle school social studies teacher, and I love that work. I love being an educator. And the reason why I decided to make education my career is because I see our schools as critically important institutions that help to provide opportunities to everyone. Everyone deserves an equal opportunity to make something great of themselves. And whenever you work as a teacher and you're inspired by that mission, there are amazing experiences. I got to work with some amazing kids. I got to, to see them grow in ways that were impressive and inspiring. But whenever you work in that space, you also see sometimes that decisions are being made at the district level that don't quite meet the mark of what our students need at the ground level. And it's that experience that inspired me to want to run for school board so that I can come into this space and try to make sure that we're putting our students first in every single decision that we make. I'm also someone with an organizing background. I was an organizer on the successful 2018 Vote Yes for St. Paul Kids campaign, helping to raise more funds for St. Paul Public Schools. And I also initiated and helped lead the successful effort to unionize my workplace, Augsburg University. And that's something that I think is a valuable experience to have as you are coming into a space where you're a board that works with labor organizations. I am, again, so excited to be in this race, so excited to speak to you all about the issues facing our district, and I hope that I'll be able to earn your vote.
Thank you. Next opening statement, Ryan Williams.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting us, SPIN for airing this for us, all the candidates for coming in and bringing attention to the issues, and everyone taking time to listen to us. I'm running this year because I kind of want to end the disconnect between the school board and the classroom. I've been fortunate enough to work every month of the pandemic. With Governor Walz, we've had an emergency child care executive order. So as schools closed, I did my part and stayed in the buildings and provided the essential child care for our critical workers. And I think, there's been a lot of disconnect. We have a lot of decision makers that they just haven't had the opportunity to be in the classroom since COVID has happened. And there's a lot of just disconnects, and we want to get things safe for our students. There's a couple things I'm kind of running for. We need to get caught up on our lead water testing. We're returning to schools. We want to be safe. We need to get the lead and water figured out. We need to fix our transportation. I'm running for that. We're a little bit behind on getting the policy for our bus monitors. That's been required since 1994. I'm trying to make the buildings more accessible for our students with disabilities. As a student, I had an IEP, and I think we need to get a little bit more helpful and accessible for our students with special needs. We need to work towards getting ready to document all the physical restraints that happen in the district. Currently, we do not have a policy to document all physical restraints, so we got to maybe shed a little light on that, document it, figure out what's going on there. I just kind of want to be the board member that brings the real world experience of working during the pandemic to keep our students and staff safe. There's just a lot of things we need to get to the board, and they just don't have the opportunity to see it because they're not in the classroom with their students. I'm proud to represent all the educators that are working in person, taking their risks and doing what they need for the community and for the kids. And thanks everybody for your time and having me here tonight.
Thank you. Next are our two candidates for the 2-year term. The first for opening statement is Jeannie Foster.
Good evening. Good evening, and thank you all for being here. Thanks to the League of Women Voters and for SPNN and to my fellow candidates. I'm Jeannie Foster. I am the current chair of the board, so I am running for re-election. I am a Frogtown girl who is a proud SPPS graduate, now living on the east side of St. Paul. I am an educator by trade and working as a social worker right now in our social services. I work with children and families every single day. And I'm running on the platform of, one, always putting our kids first. And I like to say I have a track record of that. I am also running, communication has always been a barrier in this district, and breaking down the silos that exist. Strong work has been happening and continues to work at that. And then just aligning our resources with focused on our student outcomes. So being strong fiscal, being a strong, responsible fiscal operator of this district, and ensuring that where those dollars are going, we can see that, know that the community is aware of where they're going and how they're being utilized and accessed, and just getting better at using them. There's work that we have to stop and sustain. There's new work that needs to happen, but really tying that all back to putting it about kids first, and then being a communicator from administration down to the folks on the ground doing the work every single day. I am running for re-election. I believe in our schools, and I believe I can continue to make a difference. I would love your support. It's a great job to be in, a lot of work, and I value the support of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. And opening statement, Clayton Howard.
Yeah, again, thank you, League of Women Voters, for having all of us here. My name is Clayton Howard. I am a graduate of St. Paul Public Schools, and I have 2 daughters attending St. Paul Public Schools, one in elementary school and one now in middle school. I'm super proud to be a DFL endorsed and SPFE endorsed candidate in the race. And for me, I'm also a small business owner here in St. Paul, and my background is really in construction. I own a general contracting company with my childhood friend, and I never planned on entering the system. I didn't receive training in education in college, but really the moment I walked my daughter to pre-K, and I felt this unexpected feeling of pushing my daughter into a school, and I had this sort of rush of like, I'm going to trust this school. I'm going to trust these parents. I'm going to trust this principal to educate my daughter, and I all of a sudden felt nervous. But what I found is that I ended up spending a lot of time in my daughter's pre-K class and volunteering there, and I just simply fell in love with the kids. In her my oldest daughter, in her 20 kid class, there was 9 different languages spoken. But what I quickly found is that because the school that my daughters attended was a high poverty school, we really lacked the opportunities and the resources that schools with lower levels of poverty had access to. And so I went down the road of figuring out why that is. I started our PTO, and I was our PTO president. I served on our budget finance advisory committee and did all sorts of things. And eventually I started organizing, and I really am here to make systematic change because I believe strongly that our public education is the bedrock of our democracy, and I feel currently that our public education is under threat, and we need to work. So thank you.
Thank you. We're now ready to begin our questions, and I'm going to start with a kind of difficult one, but probably one of the more important ones. And we'll start with Hala Henderson, so she can get ready. How do you define equity, and what are 3 strategies the school district should implement to increase equity?
So I think there are the things that we have done historically to build equitable schools, right? We try to fund things the best that we can, but as Clayton pointed out, based on our schools, based on tax dollars, there are schools that are simply underfunded and inequitable. When I picture equity, I think of an opportunity for all of our students to learn and thrive in each individual building, no matter their zip code, no matter their race, no matter any other external forces, right? And I think the way that we get there is by investing in each of our kids. I work with students, and they're pretty clear that what they need to succeed is that they need small class sizes. They need to know that when they walk into the building, they will be able to have individual touch points with their educators. They say that they need educators that look like them and folks in their buildings who have shared lived experiences and can teach them in a way that reflects their shared lived experiences. That builds equity. It changes how we view the education system and whose history and whose stories are centered. And our kids are pretty clear that what they need to succeed is they need to be able to go into a classroom, to go into a building and receive all of the resources they need to succeed, things like additional mental health counselors, restorative justice practices, and to know that they are safe in their buildings. And I think those steps that we have begun to take, but I think we can do more of and continue to push that and center the voices of our young people, will make a difference in building equitable buildings for all of our kids.
Thank you.
Stop sign.
Next, again, same question. How do you define equity, and what are 3 strategies the district can use to increase equity? And so Jennifer McPherson. Oh, yeah, yes, that's right. Sorry.
Okay. So, it's like, if we want our children to do better, then we can't keep on saying poverty schools. That means that it's intended for some schools to fail and some schools to succeed. Because we know that we're being zoned off by where we live. And that's contributing to it. So we need to open up the bus zones and allow our children to be bused to the schools that we want our children to be bused to, and not the schools that they live closest to or where their zip codes are allowed to go. That's a form of segregation in itself. We live in St. Paul. Our kids should go to St. Paul schools, no matter where they live. That's why we're losing a lot of children in our district to charter schools, private schools, and everywhere else, because they cannot leave their neighborhood, which causes more trouble for them at school. We need an adopt a school program from the businesses where they can adopt any school and support that school financially. From there, they would get a tax break. Like everywhere else, everything you do, you could write it off on your taxes. That's something that we need to put in. We need to rearrange our funding and freeze all the admin raises until our schools are funded. If you don't work in the building, you should not get a raise.
Thank you. Jim Vu.
Yes, I think equity, can be defined as everybody has access to the amount of resources they need to achieve the quality of living and livelihood that they envision for themselves, right? And that could be different for different folks. That could look different for different folks. But in St. Paul Public Schools, in my 10 years in St. Paul Public Schools, what I've learned that equity is always a moving target, right? We say that it's one thing 1 year, then 2 years later it changes. But there's 3 strategies that I came up with to sort of center myself, right? When the definition and the priorities of equities always change. One, first of all, is I always know my story. I always know my story about how I arrived here. I always know my story about who helped me come here. And I use that as an asset. I use that as a resource. So that's my number 2. Number 2 is identify your resources, all right? Your resource can be your story. Your resources can be the people who support you. Your resources can be the things that you have. And 3, always do something. Always act on your resources and act on your story. Always make yourself and the people in charge make decisions.
Thank you. Thank you. Uriah Ward.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's really important that we recognize that all of our students are unique individuals. They don't all have the same goals, the same needs, and the goals and needs that they have may be influenced by institutional difficulties, institutional prejudices. Some things that we can do to try to achieve equity. Something that has been echoed, several times in this campaign and that I talk about a lot is trying to make sure that we invest resources where they have the biggest direct impact on students. I think that it's really important that we try to reduce class sizes. A reduction in class sizes benefits all students, but it especially benefits the students that are struggling the most. I think it's also important that we invest in mental health supports and implement restorative practices. So we are approaching students holistically, getting to the root of misbehavior, seeing what's wrong and trying to address them in that way instead of relying on punitive measures all the time. And it's also really important that we have a curriculum that reflects the diversity of our district, that every single one of our students can see them in, see themselves in, and that reflects a real accurate picture of our history, even whenever the history doesn't look the best.
Thank you. Ryan Williams.
I think there's a lot of things we can do in the district to address our equity challenges. One important thing would be expanding Discovery Club. It's the district's childcare. There's a federal program that distributes money to the counties called CCAP, Child Care Assistance Program. Up to 50 students per program can receive subsidies for their child care. But currently we have very limited sites for our district Discovery Club program. And they're usually at more privileged schools. So if students don't have one at their school, they have to be bused to another school. That's more time for the parent to have to go pick them up afterwards. But we really need to expand on our Discovery Club, the district child care program, make it more equitable so students have access to child care after school, at their school. It's in their neighborhoods, it's in their communities, it's the buildings they're familiar with. The families can get government subsidies for 50 students per that, so we need to really get there. Our next thing we need to do to address equity is start documenting restraints. We don't quite have a policy in place yet to restrain all students. We're only documenting restraints of students with disabilities. So if we document all restraints, we can know if we're disproportionately restraining students with disabilities, if there's certain groups that are being restrained more. We really need to get on top of it and start documenting our restraints. There's no excuse not to. We really need to make our buses safer for our students. We need to catch up on the 1994 updates to the state statutes. It's really important we get our bus monitor policy in place. Thank you.
Jeannie Foster.
Thank you. Defining equity is the first question. And equity, again, equity is a buzzword, is what I've learned in my time here. But what that really means is that we're meeting every child, each and every child, where they're at in their development, their learning. But that also means we have to align resources for that. So when I think about three things that we could do with that, one is to have a plan. We need to label it, not shy away from it, and talk about the inequities that exist within our district so that we can identify them and do the work, channel the resources to those needs. We need to have an ongoing plan to monitor, assess, change, and adapt as that goes along. And that's something that is continual. Systemic equity is something that takes time and changes over time, but we need to have an active communication plan about what are our expectations around equity in this district so that we are all on the same page and can do the work together.
Thank you. Clayton Howard.
Yeah, for me to define equity, it's requiring what students need, and so that's some students need more than others. And it also, it comes from the other end too. It's having the same expectations. We need high expectations for all students, no matter where they're coming from. And quickly, three things that I would like to see to increase equity in our district. One is to provide an equitable opportunities, especially in our elementary system. We have schools that have before and after school programs and music and French and all sorts of opportunities and field trips, and then we have schools that have hardly any of those things. To me, that's just unacceptable, and we have lots of partners in the city of St. Paul that would love to step up and help out. Two, it's recruiting more black and brown teachers. We have some great programs within St. Paul Public Schools to grow our own, but I just feel that it's more urgent, and we need to recruit, and we need to create a pathway to get education graduates from other states into our state. And then third, it's sort of in the weeds, but for a parent that's been in a school that's all of a sudden taken a turn for the worse, there's lots of data that a school is producing, And when it's collected in an appropriate way, administrators, school board members, others can see when a school is struggling instead of taking years to address the issues. So those are the three things. Thank you.
Thank you. And James Farnsworth.
Yeah, this is a very important question to start off with. For me, equity looks like respecting everyone, acknowledging the trauma, the immense amount of trauma that students and educators and staff and folks working in our building right now have due to the continued pandemic. I'd echo what many other fellow candidates have said in terms of aligning resources with students and where they're needed the most, and to put students first. Three quick specifics I will talk about is ensuring, continuing to ensure that marginalized and underrepresented voices are actually authentically represented in district decision-making. Two, to ensure that students have experiences in the classroom that are reflective of their identities. I have firsthand experience with that as a student in St. Paul, or as a student in St. Paul Public Schools, and as someone who's now working on the Critical Ethnic Studies steering committee for the district. And then third, I'm ensuring that students are receiving a well-rounded education and the resources they need. It's a very timely topic. There's a large and important discussion happening about that in St. Paul Public Schools right now with the Envision SPPS initiative, and it cannot be more stated, more clearly and more repeatedly that all students across the district deserve a well-rounded education and deserve the resources they need inside and outside the classroom. And that looks like utilizing the fantastic community partners we have here in the city of St. Paul and much more. It's really a much longer discussion, but those are the three things that I would highlight in terms of equity.
Thank you. So with this next question, we're going to start with Jennifer McPherson. So there's several questions here about closing under-enrolled schools. So what is your stance on closing under-enrolled schools in the district?
For one, we need to find out why we're under-enrolled. We have people who work for the St. Paul Public School District that tells our parents to take our children out of St. Paul Public Schools and send them to charter schools. That should never come from district office. It goes against what the superintendent says. It goes against what everybody says. We try to sit there and make amends and create solutions. When we have the Attendance Matters meeting between Ramsey County attorneys and the schools, we're being told to take our children out the school district and put them into charter schools. To close the schools right now kind of goes against the educator's contract, which they just redid instead of make smaller class sizes. How can you agree to smaller class sizes and then merge schools together, which is going to overcrowd class sizes? So we need to take real accountability and honor the contracts that we're signing. When we make an agreement, we got to stick to it.
Thank you. Jim Vu.
So on my year on the board, there's three major things that school board members do. One is we evaluate the superintendent. Two is we set the direction, the priorities for the district we have the superintendent set the priority through his strategic plan. And probably the most important is fiscal responsibility. And that's what I think about when we're talking about closing under-enrolled schools, that these schools they don't have well-rounded education for all our students. In addition to that, they're being subsidized by other schools that may have or have better well-rounded education. And as a school board member, I have to at least consider this possibility. It's a part of my duty, it's a part of my job.
Thank you. Uriah Ward.
Yeah, this is, I think, top of mind for a lot of us who care about our schools in St. Paul. I am, looking toward seeing what recommendations come out next week. Personally, I think it's a really, heart-wrenching decision to have to make. It, whenever you, close a school or reconsolidate, what you're doing is, you're eliminating a learning community full of people who are invested in it and who care about it and care about each other and have formed relationships and bonds. And, it is, not impossible that it may be necessary at some point. I think that if it is going to be done, it should be done with a lot of community feedback. The community should be able to come out and influence the decision that's being made. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case in this process. Like Jennifer said, One thing that, does concern me is, as someone who really thinks it's important that we do try to reduce class sizes, is that one of the barriers that we have to that is space, and making sure that we have the classroom space available to expand into to reduce class sizes is important, and I hope that that'll be considered as the decisions are being made.
Thank you. Ryan Williams.
There's a lot of alternatives we can do to closing under-enrolled schools. One thing that'd be a big help was using space for college campuses. Metro State, they have an urban education program. I've been through that program, and a lot of students there, they can't get placement in St. Paul schools, so they go to other districts. They're at the St. Paul campus, but they can't go to St. Paul school to work. One principal I worked with, he was a professor for Metro State, and we actually had our classes at a conference room at the school. So if there's an under-enrolled school and you have that space, you could use that for an urban education program to bring in more educators, connect them to the district, get educators that better represent our students, and just use that space better. You can also do specialty magnet schools. Other districts, if there's a lot of space in a building, they'll add their ELL school to there. They can add a different sort of magnet school for different needs. So we can better use these spaces. If we have the space, we can use it to bring in better educators and better opportunities for our students and families.
Thank you. Jeannie Foster.
Hi, thank you. It is a really hard topic right now. We're in the thick of it, Vice Chair Vu and I. And to understand that our responsibility as a board member, I will make a decision once I receive all the information and I understand the effects, immediate and long-term, that it has on this district. Schools may need to close. They may need to consolidate. What we have charged the district leadership is to really give us a clear, very concise plan of why, how, what they've done to maintain and keep schools that they may be recommending open. So we have full information, and our community has a real understanding of what that looks like and means for us. So at this time, it's something that we're in the thick of. I will make a decision based off of all the totality of the information coming in and my responsibility to the students, staff, and this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Clayton Howard.
Yeah, so our family's been through that, and I can say from experience that the possibility of the school you choose, the school across the street from your house, closing, and that community being thrown to the wind is traumatic. And I have two real concerns. One is, without question, you'll see the schools that will be listed as the ones that will be closed. They're in certain neighborhoods. They won't be in Como Park. They won't be in Santee Park. They won't be in Mac Groveland. They won't be in Highland Park. They'll be in the other neighborhoods. So that's a big concern, and that's a national trend where what we do is when there's fiscal issues, when there's fiscal problems in our public schools, we close schools with black and brown kids. And second, maybe the district will provide more information, but to me, there's not even a real cost analysis. They're not even talking about the real cost an individual school takes to operate. They're talking in budget allocations. They're talking in all sorts of things. So a lot more needs to be considered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. James Farnsworth.
So as Chair Foster put it, the district is really in the thick of this right now, and I think it's important to hold two truths at the same time as a potential governing board member of the school district in my case. One being, as Vice Chair Vu put it, one of the most important roles of a school board member is to be a fiscal steward of the district. But at the same time, in this situation, understanding that closing schools is a really sensitive topic that needs to come with robust community engagement and is really painful for families. So it is hard to comment very specifically until the district lays out their specifics and roadmap and analysis of a plan regarding the Envision SPPS initiative, which is the initiative to close, merge, combine schools. But for me, my approach as a board member would be to demand and insist on robust and authentic community engagement, while also making sure that the appropriate cost analysis is there, and having empathy and leading the district and leading in the process with empathy, understanding that these are extremely traumatic conversations for families.
Thank you. And Hala Henderson.
Yeah, I think the reality is, because we have underfunded and divested funds from our school districts for years now, we are at a place where we have to make really, really difficult decisions. And at the end of the day, we don't want to close any schools, right? If we can keep our buildings open, if we can keep our neighborhood schools in our neighborhoods and our kids in those buildings, we're doing our jobs. So I think there are two questions for me that I'm holding with this is, one, why are our kids leaving? Why are families pulling their kids out of our districts, sending them to charters, sending them to different districts? And then two, knowing how difficult this conversation and this experience is for our communities and our families, what are we doing to communicate with them authentically and consistently from start to finish? And I think that is something that we can continue to work on and need to work on, because the only way we get through this, the only way we continue to build trust or rebuild trust that has been broken, is through constant communication and transparency with our families.
Thank you. So now I think I'm just going to skip the order around, and we're going to start with Ryan Williams, so you're prepared. So I've heard a lot of talks about money, lack of money, no money, not enough money. So what would you do as a school board member to advocate for more funding from the Minnesota legislature?
There's a lot of places where we can get funding where we're missing out. Right now, there's Minneapolis just got $1.8 million for testing. That is a grant, that's federal money. But we can do that too for testing. We can implement our testing here. There's a lot of solutions for raising more money. We have to really engage with the community. They want to be interested in locally in supporting our levies. So that's another great source. On the legislative level, we need to work with our local legislators. We need to reach out more by expanding our participation in the legislative page program so we can get more of our students in the legislature, helping, participating, volunteering, and seeing what it's like and communicating to our legislators and lawmakers that we need the funding. So having our students, give them the opportunity for the page program and let them, represent our needs, and they can do a great job explaining what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Uriah Ward.
I'm not sure who asked the question, but whoever it was, whoever submitted this, thank you so much. I think this is such a critical question. Our schools have been chronically underfunded, and that's why we're having a lot of the difficult discussions that we're having about, closing down schools or, like trying to, decide, where to invest our money. And I don't think that we can, as school board members or potential school board members, ignore this critical piece. The legislature is where we get a significant amount of our funds, and we have to be willing to engage with them. And I think that it's important that we all establish relationships with our legislators to be, a constant bug in their ear, like, saying like, this is what we need, this is what we're experiencing, this is how we need to do better, and really taking it upon ourselves to be active. And also in our, personal capacity, not as like in our formal school board capacity, we should try to help people who support fully funding our schools get elected to public office. I mean, like we have, if we don't have the right people in place, those decisions aren't going to be made. I mean, so I'm willing to like host a fundraiser for someone who's willing to like, go flip a seat. If you're watching at home, you're invited. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Jim Vu.
I think our legislators need to know the truth of our families and our students and our teachers that are happening in St. Paul Public Schools. I think I don't know how I don't know how much to the extent that they'll listen to me, but what I'll know is that I'll march our families, I'll march our teachers up there, I'll march our students, and let them tell the truth. I think that's the most effective way to get them on our side and help support our schools.
Thank you. Jennifer McPherson.
All right, so just to build a plan that we could present that shows that not only are we going to make changes, but we're going to restructure the district. And what that looks like is rebuilding from the inside, getting rid of, people that are not there for the community, people are not there for the children, bringing new people into positions, creating new positions for people and getting families employed through the district. When we have a plan like that set in place, then we'll really get people attention, we'll get the legislature, we'll get the funding. So once we come up with a reasonable plan that shows that we're ready to make real changes in our district, then we'll get the proper funding.
Thank you. Hala Henderson.
Yeah, so this is something that we've talked about a lot on the campaign trail, and something that I feel like is a really great opportunity for us to flex those organizer muscles and really be there and building with folks, not just in St. Paul and in the district, but other districts, right? So I do statewide work in education policy, and I am connected to school board members and folks across the state who have the same concerns that, hey, our schools are underfunded. We are constantly looking and to make cuts or to find ways to pass levies to do a temporary short-term fix, but it's not enough. So I think that there is a space for us to really do a lot of organizing across the state. I also am really lucky and privileged to have deep connections to the legislature. That's where most of my work happens. And I think that there is a lot of energy and excitement around the idea of continuing to invest in our students. It is an uphill battle to get funding passed in the legislature. It does not happen overnight, but I think if we invest in each other and we build a strong coalition of folks, we can get there and we can make some change.
Thank you. James Farnsworth.
So I would echo a lot of what's been said. I think it's really important to build a broad-based coalition to do work at the legislature for fully funded K-12 education. As a student and as an alumni of the district, I worked with the organization formerly known as Parents United for Public Schools. It was an incredible data-driven organization, and I miss it every day in these conversations. There's also associations and organizations of school board members across the state that I think it's important to be plugged into. I do a community conversation series on my campaign Facebook page, and I interviewed a friend of mine who's a school board member in Independent School District 832, and we spent a lot of time talking about this question, so I'd encourage folks to check that out. I have past organizing experience in the area of government affairs, so I'd look forward to putting that work to use as a school board member. And then if folks are looking for a really great resource on this question, I would suggest the St. Paul Federation of Educators Fund Our Future report, which is on SPFE's website, to talk about the longevity of why our schools are underfunded and some really great analysis around this question.
Thank you. Clayton Howard.
Yeah, could you repeat the question for me? Sorry.
Yes. What would you do to advocate for more funding from the Minnesota legislature?
Yeah, so for me, it's a few things. So for one, I think nationally, statewide, and locally, we chronically underfund education, but we especially chronically underfund education for the kids in the highest need. And so it's not a surprise that our district is in a very similar position as Minneapolis Public Schools. And as you go out into the districts that are less urban and have lower levels of poverty, they don't have the same issues that we do. I think a lot of times it gets blamed on leadership or whomever, but the reality is that we need to fund our kids that need the most. We have kids that, we have a lot of kids that are experiencing homelessness, trauma, their parents are incarcerated, they've lost grandparents to COVID, and on and on and on. And that makes it difficult just to get through the day, let alone get your education. So I think that has to be communicated to people not in Minneapolis and St. Paul, that our kids in the highest need more from us.
Thank you. And Jeannie Foster.
SPPS does have a legislative representative who works with folks at the Capitol. I will tell you all that St. Paul has some really strong folks at the Capitol invested in education and trying to fully fund education. It does seem to be an uphill battle. I struggle the most with, public education is under attack is what I feel like right now. And I feel like this is a civil rights issue. If we're saying it's important to communities, our schools are the hub, then our legislators need to be active in pushing that forward. One of those ways is just continuing to talk with your legislators. We all know elected officials, particularly as elected officials or people looking at, we've been talking to connect with those folks, but also let our families know they can show up. We can show up as board members when we're needed in those meetings, but let our families know their voices matter and they can show up, call their legislators as well. It's a lot of work. I will continue to say that public education is under attack and it is a civil right that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. We're going to start the next question with Uriah Ward. And since we're all wearing masks, we're just going to talk about the COVID problem. So COVID-19 has been really difficult for schools, and it's been difficult for families. And we know we went to home learning and we lost children, and children haven't come back. It's a very big problem. We know it's caused a lot of understaffing. And there's a bunch of questions about understaffing buses and understaffing specialists and so that whole issue of understaffing. as well as the issue of both student and staff stress, which is a very real thing. So how could the district address some of these issues that our families and staff are facing? Uriah Ward.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, one of the biggest struggles that we faced, over the past, how long has it been? A decade? How long has this been? Anyway, so I was really glad to see that St. Paul Public Schools did institute mask and vaccine mandates for our schools to make sure we're keeping our students, staff, and families safe. I feel like that was a critical step. And I think that in everything that we're doing, it's important that we try to put our families, our students first, and consider their safety. I think that we have to make sure that we are investing in mental health support so that as we're coming back into this space, that we can address the trauma that people feel and have experienced. And I think that we have had a lot of trouble trying to staff adequately, and that's not just a problem that is recent. We've had teacher shortages for a while. And I think that something that the school board should focus on is trying to make sure that our schools are good and productive workplaces, and work with our bargaining units to try to make sure we're addressing our staff needs.
Thank you. Jim Vu.
Can you repeat the question again?
How can the district best address the understaffing issues and the staff and student stress that has been caused by COVID?
So the American Rescue Plan funds are designed to do just that. It's designed to address learning loss from students, the mental and emotional support of students. It's designed to, if we could, supplement our current teaching staff with additional staff to support learning in the school buildings. But the manner by which we engage using the ARP and how we identify what those goals should be in the ARP is another matter. So that's the most straightforward answer, and the opportunity that I can tell everybody is that ARP is $206 million. There's a timeline that we can spend it in, about three to 4 years. It's a great opportunity to get some feedback from folks who are impacted in this way from COVID-19, so we can better target our goals and direct resources where they need to go to support these needs.
Thank you. Jennifer McPherson.
I think the first step would be to add a pandemic response team to our district. And not only a pandemic response, but a weather response too, because our kids have been stuck on the buses during snowstorm. So we need people that are going to make the right decision for our children and keep them safe. So those two things are a must. And within that, that provides the funding for the mental health associated with COVID. And on the mental health, it should be also included the families of the students. Because throughout COVID, not only have we seen a rise in domestic violence, but also, with the children too. The first murder in St. Paul was a child during COVID. So that is something that we need to address, not only with the child, but with the families as well. Another thing that we need to do is get our teachers to where they're comfortable to be in the building, and if they're not comfortable, then allow them the online option instead of trying to force them into the buildings.
Thank you. Hala Henderson.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, COVID, the pandemic itself has exacerbated a lot of the issues that were already within the district and within the culture of our buildings to begin with. We talk about understaffed or buildings or not having enough folks who are ready or willing to come back to work. And I think what we're speaking to, right, is the culture of being in the buildings. Do you feel like you have enough resources in your buildings? Are you getting paid enough? All of these things that directly impact your experience while working there. And I also think one of the things that I have consistently heard from folks, either folks in our buildings or folks who have kids in our district, is that the lack of communication or the struggle to understand what was happening at any given moment within the district has been a barrier and continues to be a barrier. So I think really continuing to pivot to be able to give as many folks the resources and the information that they need. I think the mask and vaccine mandate was a really good first step in building trust and making sure our educators and our staff feel safe. But we need to do more.
Thank you. James Farnsworth.
So I would very much agree with many of the pieces that have already been mentioned by fellow candidates in terms of policy-making levers that we can pull, ensuring that we're investing in appropriate mental health supports, making sure that we are looking at things like retention bonuses for staff in buildings. That's an issue that was brought to my attention by a labor representative I was in conversation with the other day when he pointed out the investments other districts are making in retention bonuses for nutrition services workers. I thought that was a really interesting idea. Making sure from kind of more of a broader engagement piece, again, that we continue to acknowledge and understand the trauma that students, staff, faculty, everyone involved in our schools are facing. And then something that Hala pointed out in response to a different question around you cannot understate the importance enough of consistent communication and family engagement to address trauma and address stressors. I'd also agree with what Vice Chair Vu was saying with the American Rescue Plan dollars. I think that's a really unique opportunity in front of us, not only at the school district level, but at the city level as well.
Thank you. Clayton Howard.
Yeah, so a couple things. So our family found out in the same day of our two daughters at two different schools were, in our definition as parents, exposed to COVID. The school district didn't inform us because it didn't meet MDH guidelines, and we understood that. But we really would have appreciated a call saying, hey, you know, it doesn't meet the guidelines for you to receive a call, but we're doing it anyway, just to make you feel more comfortable. Things like that go a long ways. And also, I think this is a really difficult time, and parents, citizens, everybody doesn't expect our school district to be perfect. And so say that once in a while. That would go a long way. And then the other big thing to me is that the term learning loss or terms learning loss, we've heard so many times. And it's real, and we need to do something about it. But it's important that we don't push that down on our kids. I would like to see more of empowering our teachers, empowering our families, to let our kids re-engage in community, give them time, let them play, let them be with their friends, and that's not their concern is the learning loss. So,
Thank you. Jeannie Foster.
As regards to COVID and in buildings returning to school, that was our priority, to get as many kids in their seats. We have a crisis nationally, but here in St. Paul, and we have to actualize and realize that and get creative about how we can provide what kids need in both spaces, in person and in school. Our staff are extremely optimistic. I've been in buildings the last 2 weeks, but they're tired. They're exhausted. It's a lot of work. We've got kids coming back who have been out of buildings for 18 months, getting back into rituals and routines. We've got different stories being told, and this district really continues to work at getting better with how we're messaging, getting things out. We're listening and adapting, but that's the most crucial part of hearing from folks and making the needed, necessary adaptations. But I will tell you, and just to be upfront and honest, and I just said to my fellow board members, we got to be honest with our community. Right now, it's really tough, and it's really hard, not just in St. Paul, but elsewhere. But in St. Paul, we have to acknowledge we're struggling, and we're going to keep working at it.
Thank you. And Ryan Williams.
We need to start leading by example. Most of us candidates up here, we can't keep our masks on for an hour and a half. We're going to have the students and staff do it for 8 hours. So we're not better candidates, board members, they're not better than the students and staff. We need to start following and leading by example. You know, we reopened schools to in-person learning from the safety of a virtual meeting. So we really need to step up and start leading by example. If you can't count on the adults here trying to lead the district, we can't count on the kids to wear their masks. So we need to really step it up and start leading by example. We went masks optional over the summer. That was not a good idea. If we can't lead by example, how can we expect the parents to follow the MDH guidelines for regular testing? Like, it's just, we need to turn this around. We need to lead by example. How can the teachers trust us if we can't even follow the rules we enforce on them? We tell the teachers they need to be mandated for vaccine, but we can't even provide the optional testing for students. It's time that we accept the optional free testing from the state. The state is offering us free testing options. We need to start accepting that.
Thank you. For the next question, we'll start with Jim Vu. And I'd like to kind of ask a positive one. You know, we all know all of these are many issues that are difficult to deal with. So what would you say the strengths are of the St. Paul Public Schools, and how would you support sustaining those strengths to ensure that all students benefit?
I think one of the strengths of St. Paul Public Schools is the people that make up St. Paul Public Schools. St. Paul Public Schools is made up of families and students from interconnected neighborhoods. They make a collective identity, St. Paul Public Schools. We have staff that live here in St. Paul. In St. Paul, we have staff who live outside of the city, but they all come here and they make this their home. One of the things that I've always seen, one of the things that I always think is that I looked at St. Paul as is that it's a big part of my kid's life, and I kind of see it as a part of our family, a part of our home. So I always value it in that way, and that's how I treat it, and that's how I treat the people in there.
Thank you. Jennifer McPherson?
Well, one strength that our district has is diversity, and we have the ability to embrace multiple cultures and ethnicities. I would love to see that shown in our schools and every building. Another strength that we have is our teachers and educators. They create bonds with family. They create real relationships. And sometimes that goes outside of the classroom, and it goes years beyond the classroom. So that's just two strengths that I appreciate and that I want to see, grew upon that.
Thank you. Hala Henderson?
Yeah, I love this question because I think there are so many things about our district that are beautiful and are wonderful and should be talked about more often, right? We have a lot of problems, we have a lot of things and battles to come, but our kids are brilliant. They are the future of our state, and it is so exciting to be around them. We have incredible educators and workers who spend day in and day out in our buildings trying to provide the best possible education for our learners. And I think the community that continues to show up to board meetings, to watch things like this, folks running for office, right? Like, it is a symbol of how much pride and love we have for our district and the potential of what we could do together. And then I think finally, right, St. Paul is, as Jennifer pointed out, an incredibly diverse community. We have so many shared experiences and histories here that we could be centering and talking about, and our students see that and they feel pride in who they are and where they come from. And I think we have the potential and we have the possibility to invest in them and to invest in that in our district.
Thank you. James Farnsworth?
I would echo what many fellow candidates have said already, and something I mentioned earlier about the rich diversity of our school district. We are one of the most diverse school districts in the nation, and you can see that in our buildings each and every day. I've experienced that as a student in St. Paul Public Schools. I continue to see that as an active school volunteer. I was interviewing Councilmember Jane Prince yesterday on my Facebook page for my community conversation series, and she told a really amazing story around her experiencing the multicultural fair at Harding High School, and it made me feel warm inside. I wish I was able to be there to join her for that experience. I think we have an incredible amount of opportunity in front of us, which is something that excites me. Again, the Envision SPPS initiative, which is top of mind for everyone, has many legitimate policy and process critiques, but it also is going to give us an opportunity to really give students the well-rounded education, the resources they deserve, and I think we need to look at that as a positive thing and look at that opportunity there as something we can embrace, because our incredible student, staff, families, everyone deserves those resources and deserves that attention.
Thank you. Clayton Howitt?
Yeah, so a few things. One, the kids. In my spare time, I'm a youth hockey coach, and if somehow I could find a full-time job to be a 10U hockey coach, that would be my #1 job of choice. So our kids are absolutely amazing. And one story I like to tell that kind of demonstrates about our kids and what our kids are getting is, if people remember 3 or 4 years ago when there was the Christchurch massacre at the mosque, my daughter and a group of her friends, third graders, they were white, multiracial, Latino, Asian, they decided for the next day, for one of their friends who was Somali, that they were all all going to wear hijab. And they all had hijabs because that Somali mother, the mother of that Somali friend had taken them to Carmel Market over in Minneapolis to get these girls henna. So as third graders, they understood that, and that's what our kids gain at St. Paul Public Schools. They become global citizens. They develop a cultural competency that I don't have myself. So I think that's the number one thing that our kids get from our school district.
Jeannie Foster.
Thank you. Ditto doesn't count, does it, for all of you all? Our school is, one of my greatest joys about SPPS is how diverse this community is. And with that comes a lot of challenges to navigate, making sure all our families are inclusive. But we've got a strong group of families that are very vocal. They're there. We're St. Paul strong. When we are in our challenges, whether it's a mayor on a school bus or parents taking snacks out to a school bus that's stuck in the snow, to working with our labor union and bargaining partners to have opportunities for internships. We are a community that, whether it's good or bad, we are in it together. So I have to say that. And then again, I feel like St. Paul does a really good job of trying, and I'm going to say this, trying to always put kids first. We're not there yet, but we're working on it. And that's why the goal is for me to continue to stay so kids are always at the center of our decision making.
Thank you. Ryan Williams.
I think the biggest strength we have for our students is we have just the most amazing support staff. We've really seen that over the last couple years. Teachers went on strike. Our support staff were there giving, a safe place for students. COVID happened. The schools closed down. The support staff continued to do essential childcare for our critical workers. Our support staff, they come from they're the biggest amount of backgrounds. They've got the most languages, most cultural backgrounds, have lived here for a while. We have some great custodial staff. They've been doing the job, after their dad did it years before. We've got custodial staff, EAs, TAs, child care assistants, health office workers, our food service workers. There's just so many, amazing support staff, and we have to remember them. We have to acknowledge them. And when everybody else goes home, whether it's a strike or a global pandemic, our support staff are there showing up for our students, keeping it open, keeping it safe. So I really want to thank our support staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And Uriah Ward.
I'm going to echo a lot of what's already been said. Our diversity is our strength, and one thing that is amazing about St. Paul Public Schools is that if you're a student in St. Paul Public Schools, you're going to meet students and interact with students who have such a wide variety of experiences and backgrounds, and really, like Clayton said, become a global citizen. And Chair Foster was saying, I think as a district do try really hard to make sure that we are addressing, the needs. And I think that we all sort of say, it'd be great if things are better, and we want things to be better. And I think that is true, but it's also important to recognize that, the St. Paul Public Schools is working to try to make sure our curriculum is more reflective of our students. Equity is at the forefront of so many conversations. Training is being provided to a lot of our teachers to try to make sure that they're more culturally responsive teachers. We have the Suitor program, which is working to try to bring in more diverse teachers. And I think that all of those are really important, and it's exciting to see what our district is and what our district is striving to be.
Thank you. So I think I can squeeze in one last question, but we have to do it in a little bit different way before we go to the closing statements. And so we don't need a timer, because I'm going to give you in 3 words to describe yourself, and they could be 3 different words, they don't have to be related words. Describe yourself that tells us all why you are qualified for this job as a school board member for St. Paul Schools. And I'm going to mix up the order too, so this is always hard, right? Because now you think of 3 words. See, I'm giving everybody time to think a little bit, right? So we'll start this with Jeannie Foster.
3 words of why.
What makes you, why you're qualified for this job?
Ooh. Experienced, realistic, passionate.
James Farnsworth, your 3 words.
All right, well, I'm going to echo one of Chair Foster's, because I had it on my sheet already before she started. Would be passionate, dedicated, and service-oriented.
Clayton Howard.
I would say knowledgeable, action, and loving.
Hala Henderson.
Y'all keep stealing my words. I would say student-centered, strategic, and I'm going to choose energetic.
Jim Vu. Your 3 words.
I have clarity, I have focus, and I have alignment.
Ryan Williams.
In-person experience. In-person experience, that's 3.
Yes. I was going to say, wait, that's it. Uriah Ward
Educator, organizer, student-centered.
and Jennifer McPherson.
I say advocate, I'm intelligent, and I'm a fighter.
Thank you for doing that. So we are ready to do our closing statements, and again, I'm going to go in reverse order, exactly reverse order, I hope, to how we started. You again have 2 minutes to make your concluding remarks, and we're going to start with Clayton Howard.
Yeah, so thank you again, League of Women Voters, for having us. I'm looking at the state of St. Paul Public Schools right now. In the last 5 years, we have lost almost 4,000 students. Our graduation rates haven't improved. Our achievement gaps are the same. And now we're facing school closures. And so I feel like we're at a real precipice of what are we going to do? And we're facing a time when we may get to the point where we don't have St. Paul Public School elementary schools in every neighborhood. And to me, that is urgent. But I believe strongly in this district. I love St. Paul Public Schools. We have the most incredible students. We have families. I've been in contact with so many families and worked with so many parents over the years that spend countless hours advocating for their children, but all children. We have some of the most incredible educators. It would take me a few hands to count the number of amazing educators that have affected my life from St. Paul Public Schools, but also the lives of our daughters. And so I know that we can do this together, but we're facing difficult times and we have to be realistic about that. So I'm ready and prepared to take that on.
Thank you. And Jeannie Foster.
Hi. What do I want to say that I haven't said? I really I believe in public education and what it can do for children. I believe in the power of a teacher to mold and change and inspire a child to be, for a love of learning. I am a mom, an educator. I have been working tirelessly the last 4 years to get some good grounding, to get a plan in place, because systemic changes take time. And now we're starting to see some of the fruits of that labor, and I want to continue to be a part of that. But that means all hands on deck, whether we're sitting at the table of the board or we're parents or community members. There's an investment for our schools to thrive. That means as a board member, I need to engage everyone around what's going on in our schools. And so I'm saying today that I'm here. I have been listening. I have been doing the work. I have been a part of that policy. We have made some wonderful progress. We have stumbled, and we have acknowledged that through listening and changing course. And that is going to be the ongoing work of this district to ensure that each and every child has classrooms and spaces and people in front of them that will change the trajectory of their learning and make them lifelong learners and prepared for school success and later life. I would love your endorsement for re-election. Thank you.
Thank you. Those were our 2 candidates who are running for the 2-year term. So our next group of candidates are running for the 4-year terms, and we'll start with Ryan Williams, your closing statement.
Thank you, everybody, again, for your time, the League of Women Voters and SPIN for holding us today. I just say, please help me protect the students and staff. We really need to start catching up on the lead and water testing. That's required every 5 years. This was due between August and April. So let's get caught up on that. We need to start updating our bus transportation policies to meet the state statutes that were set in the 90s. We really need to fix the busing so we can get our kids safely to and from school. Please, let's get a policy passed to start documenting all physical restraints of students. If we're not documenting it, we're not going to find a solution to end this practice of restraints. It just needs to end. And let's just start providing the optional testing for students at schools. We can't make excuses anymore for not having tests available. We've mandated the vaccine for teachers. It's time to start making tests an option for students. We got to keep everybody safe by not posting, all of the confirmed cases and not offering testing. We're just burying our head in the sand and trying to hide the actual positive case results. So let's just be transparent. Let's start testing. It's not the teachers that are at risk to causing the risk. Students can also be contagious. So we really need to get this testing done in schools. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I really appreciate this, and let's do our part to start keeping our students and staff safe.
Thank you. Uriah Ward.
Yeah, thank you again to everyone who was involved with putting together this forum. Thank you to everyone who came here to listen to us and to ask questions, and for everyone at home. I'm in this race for the same reason why I decided to make education my career. It's because I believe that every single student deserves a high-quality education that sets them up for success, whatever success means for them, and that's different for different people. And I want to, as much as I can, be a part of a board that works to try to put students first and to give students the schools they deserve. We've run a great student-centered, student-led campaign. We've been endorsed by the St. Paul DFL, the St. Paul Federation of Educators, some other amazing organizations and community leaders have come out to support our campaign, and it's been an overwhelming experience. And I'm inviting everyone here and everyone at home to join our campaign as well. I'm asking for your vote. It would be an amazing opportunity to be able to serve on the board and to be able to work on these issues. And I look forward to working with my future colleagues on the school board and also everyone here and at home, because building great public schools is not something that board members can do alone. It's a collaborative process, and I'm so excited to work with all of you.
Thank you. Jim Vu.
So I just want to say that St. Paul Public Schools is more than the sum of its parts. It's more than a line item on a budget report. It's more than human transactions on a board report. It's more than just, it's more than all these things, right? And when I look at St. Paul Public Schools, I think about the impact that it makes on my children's lives, right? I think about how proud they are when they come home from school and they talk about the friends that they made, they talk about the teachers that they learned from. It really is bigger than the sum of its parts. And again, I say this all the time, that St. Paul Public Schools is a part of my home. It's a part of the city. It's a part of the place that I want to live. And when I do my work on the board, that's how I treat it as. If you live in your house, you want to invest in your house, you want to build it, you want to make it better. So everybody wants to come visit you. Everybody wants to come be there. And that's how I approach St. Paul Public Schools. When St. Paul Public Schools succeed, my children succeed. And I really am just here to make sure that happens. I don't have, I've never been an issues candidate. I've never been interested in politics. I just want St. Paul Public Schools to be successful because that's what my children needs, and that's how I will lead.
Thank you. Jennifer McPherson.
All right. First of all, thank you, League of Women Voters, for hosting this. I'm a common sense person. Everything I do, I make my decisions based off of common sense and the whys and the why nots. I am pro-black, which is anti-nothing. Being pro-black means that you want so much for yourself and others that you would sacrifice. Because that's what it is, to stand up and say, I'm pro-black, and I'm taking this stance and doing it for my community. I speak with truth. Everything that I have said throughout my campaign is something that will continue to go on forever. I was born and raised in St. Paul, graduated from Harding High School in 2000. I'm the first female wrestler in St. Paul. I've been fighting the school district since I've been 12 years old, just so I could find my place on a wrestling team. And nothing has changed in our district since 1993, when they told me I could not wrestle because I was a girl. And that same mentality is still in our district. Zoning off our bus zones, telling our kids where they can and can't go to school. You're doing the same thing repeatedly. I attended Inner City Youth League as a child. That was ran by Kwame McDonald, Bobby Hickman, civil rights activists, Bill Wilson, the first black city council member. My mother and father helped start up early childhood education in St. Paul schools. This is not just a fight for me, and not just a fight for my family, but a fight for the whole city and anybody further.
Thank you. Thank you. Hala Henderson.
Yeah, I want to echo, my thanks to the league and to all of the folks that are here and that are watching this. And I want to say that this is a campaign that was built by young people. When I made the decision to run for office, the first people I turned to were students in our district. They built my platform with me. They have been there every step of the way, and because of that, I have become a stronger candidate, and our message has been clear. Now is the time to invest in them and to give our students the resources that they need to succeed. I am excited to be in this race and to continue the conversation on what it would mean to invest in our students in things like smaller class sizes, additional mental health resources, and continuing to invest in restorative practices that would help our students to stay in our buildings and to avoid the traumatic experiences that come with punitive measures. I know what it means to be left out of political spaces. I know what it means to only be spoken to when you want our vote or when you need something from community. And it's that lived experience, it's that knowledge of how political systems have always worked that drives me to build with community. I don't think that if elected, I will be on the board as a single vote. I think that every time I make a decision, it will be because of the voices of community who are at my back and are telling me what they need and what they need to see happen. Again, I am proud to be one of the DFL endorsed candidates for the 4-year term. I'm proud to be endorsed by our teachers union and other working class labor movements as well. And I am excited to get into the work, and I ask for your support and your vote in November.
Thank you. And, excuse me, James Farnsworth.
I want to again thank the League of Women Voters, SPNN, and everyone else who made tonight possible. It was a fantastic opportunity to be together and discuss the issues. A few things that I am extremely passionate about and I believe have a record on are insisting on authentic community engagement, making sure we uplift the voices that have been marginalized and haven't been at the table for far too long, and being firm about leading and governing with good governance principles in the forefront. As an experienced governing board member of a variety of sizes of institutions, along with being a product of St. Paul Public Schools, I ask for your support and your vote on November 2nd. This work and fighting for education is extremely important to me as an alum of SPPS, as a student, as a son of 2 longtime public school teachers, as a product of some really fantastic St. Paul Public School educators and staff members and other community volunteers who mentored me within the schools. This work is really personal, and it's something that I believe my skills and experiences would lend itself well to, particularly in the moment the district is in right now. Because we're in this space, I'd be remiss not to thank Chair Foster and Vice Chair Vu for their service on the board and for always putting kids first and showing what that looks like. I know no one goes into school board service for the compensation, and it's because you believe in kids and believe in supporting families that you serve on a school board. So I wanted to thank you both for that. And that is the approach that I would take as a member of the school board, always putting our kids first, always centering the voices of students. I've been focusing on that ever since I was a student that kicked off some of the conversations that led to the Student Engagement and Advancement Board in St. Paul. I'm honored to stand with a coalition of fantastic community leaders, including Council President Amy Brenmoen, Councilmember Prince, Councilmember Yang, St. Paul Federation of Educators, and a bunch of other fantastic labor organizations and other organizations that support our schools and believe in education.
Thank you very
I
much.
ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I want to remind the listening audience that the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters, and sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement by the League for any specific candidates. I also would like to thank all of you candidates here this evening for participating in this forum. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for serving your community by your willingness to participate in the democratic process by running for office. I would also like to thank the Voter Service Committee, who put in a lot of work in the St. Paul League for putting this candidate forum together. As a reminder, I was asked to say this, so I'm saying it again. The candidate forum recording may not be used without the express written approval of the League of Women Voters, and the League only allows the entire broadcast to be reused in its entirety except by media for their reporting. And please check your SPNN station for when the additional air times will be. As we've learned in the past few elections, every vote does count. This year, Election Day is Tuesday, November 2nd. If you're going to vote in person, the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Stay safe, and thank you, and good night.
Thank you.